Today's Friday Forum is made possible by Bank of the Cascades, CenturyLink, Family Care Health Plan, Miller Nash, The Standard, and Stoll Reeves. Good afternoon and welcome to City Club of Portland Friday Forum. I'm John HORVICK, City Club President, and I'd like to welcome members and guests alike. Those of you who join us today at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB Radio or watching on Portland Community Media. Before I begin, I just want to recognize and welcome a U.S. Attorney for Oregon, Amanda Marshall, who's joined us in the audience today. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Amanda, Attorney Marshall. Today, Brian Renauer will lead a discussion with three officials with key responsibilities for reviewing actions of Portland police officers. But first, some announcements. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensures we put on the state's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine. Our current Friday Forum sponsors are Bank of the Cascades, CenturyLink, Family Care Health Plans, Miller Nash, The Standard, Stoll Reeves. We are grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a warm round of applause for all of them. Join us next week for the State of the County address from Multnomah County Chair Marissa Madrigal. During the month of February, we will also have several after-hour events, including with Siemens Rail Electrification Factory and an age-friendly housing options in Portland. You can learn more about these and other club events, purchase tickets, and become a member on our website, pdxcityclub.org. As always, City Club will be live tweeting at today's event. You can follow us or mention us at PDX City Club, and be sure to use the hashtag CityClub in your own tweets. We have a Q&A session with our guests at the end of today's program. Members, please come to the microphone to ask your questions. And for all our audience participants, please locate the index cards on the center of your tables and write your questions on them during the forum. We'll collect them prior to the start of the Q&A. And now to our program. Responding to allegations of police misconduct is a major issue in Portland. This issue is back in the spotlight after the city signed a consent agreement in response to a federal finding that its police repeatedly used excessive force against people with mental illness. Today, three key officials charged with policing the police in Portland are here to discuss the issue. Not long after her assuming her current position of Portland City Auditor, LaVonne Griffin-Valade successfully sought a new law granting her office independent responsibility for reviewing allegations against the police. Early this year, she gained further authority to investigate police action and in some cases, compel officers to respond. Constantin Severe has worked in the city's independent police review office since 2008 and was appointed to direct it last June. Prior to working for the city, he was a criminal defense attorney in the major felonies unit at the Portland Public Defender's Office in Portland. The Metropolitan Public Defender's Office in Portland. Mike Reese has served as Portland's Chief of Police since 2010, reporting directly to the mayor. He worked at the Portland Boys and Girls Club before becoming a Multnomah County Sheriff's Deputy in 1989 and transferring to the Portland Police Bureau in 1994 before rapidly rising in its ranks. Brian Renauer will moderate today's discussion. Brian chairs Portland State University's Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice and directs its Criminal Justice Policy Research Institute. Much of his teaching and research has been devoted to studying the relationship between communities and their police. And so with that brief introduction, let me welcome you all to City Club. And Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
Welcome, everyone. I wanted to start today's conversation by getting a brief overview of the two major bodies responsible for police oversight. And having two bodies responsible for police oversight is a pretty common trend throughout the United States. We have the traditional body of oversight, the Internal Police Affairs Division of the Portland Police Bureau. But we also have an external body, the Independent Police Review Division which is housed in the city auditor's office. So I wanted to start with the Independent Police Review Division, and could you please provide Constantin or LaVonne a sort of brief overview of the primary functions of the Police Independent Review Division, and then maybe you could also speak to the vision of your division.
So the Independent Police Review Division is the city's intake point for community member complaints. So when somebody has an issue with a police officer, they can come to our office and file a complaint, and we take a complaint through phone, walk-ins, email. We also take commendations involving police officers who do good things. We also conduct reviews of police actions. We hire outside reviewers in officer-involved shootings and custody deaths. We just did one in the summer of 2013. We'll be doing another one this summer, I believe. One of our biggest roles is for every officer-involved shooting, our office goes out to the scene and monitors the investigation from the minute it begins to when the case ends, at least from the investigative part at the Police Review Board.
Good afternoon. So I ask for you to bear with me, please, today, because I'm apparently fighting off the mother of all monster colds ever to have gripped this city. So my voice is not the cool sort of contralto it usually is. So I want to give you a little background. I was sworn in as city auditor in June of 2009. I lead a staff of 50. And unlike any other large city in the United States, Portland's auditor is responsible for a wide range of good government and oversight functions that require neutrality and independence. So in all, there are 8 divisions in the auditor's office, including council clerk function, the hearings office, the ombudsman function, and archives and records management. We have a few other smaller functions, including elections. That have historically been placed in the independently elected auditor's office. So regarding our police oversight responsibilities, my office goes at this in 2 different ways. First, the audits division conducts performance audits of the Portland Police Bureau. And since 2009, we have issued 5 reports including a comprehensive audit of the Police Bureau looking at whether or not it was a learning organization, which means really assessing whether or not it has learned from past problems and the organization has evolved and made positive changes. We're also about to release a follow-up to an audit issued in 2007 on the city's response to sexual assault cases. And we have started an audit of the Portland Police Bureau's training practices. So there's that piece of our oversight responsibility. And on the second front, the Independent Police Review Division, established in 2001, and I think it didn't open its doors for complainants until 2002. As Constantin already explained, takes complaints from the public regarding alleged misconduct, and takes those complaints through a fairly complex and intense process. So along the way, IPR, also monitors and participates in investigations and does a lot more. So Constantin has already discussed the details and the mechanics of the investigative and disciplinary processes. And I mostly want to focus on the policy direction. I knew coming into the city that IPR would likely be an aspect of this job that would cause me some heartburn. So I was right about that. Police accountability being the high-profile, important, and emotionally charged issue it often is in our community. The work we have undertaken to create a stronger, more transparent, and effective civilian oversight system that is fair to both community members and officers has been some of the most challenging and rewarding work I've ever been involved in. We've gone through 2 major reforms of IPR and the police oversight system since I've been in office, and I'm not sure if now is the time to kind of walk through what those changes have entailed, but I feel like I've talked more than I intended.
That is a specific question, so if you want to hold on, maybe we'll talk about those changes here. Thank you. So I wanted to ask the next question for Chief Reese. What is the primary function then of the Internal Affairs Division of the Portland Police Bureau, and how does it link up with the Auditor's Office division?
Well, Brian, thank you very much. And I want to first acknowledge the great work that is being done in our Professional Standards Division, which oversees our internal affairs. And we have Captain Dave Famous, Lieutenant Jeff Bell, Christina Snyder, and Christopher Paillet, who work in that office here today. And they work in close coordination with the Independent Police Review to ensure that we are holding officers accountable and adjudicating complaints, as well as investigating officer performance issues. So the Independent Police Review also assists us in the processes as we do internal reviews of potential misconduct or officers' performance. Typically, those types of cases that are generated from within the Bureau are started at a division level. Maybe a division commander brings forward a complaint about an officer, or something happens in the public. An officer might be arrested for something. Those cases are investigated through Detective Division if they're criminal, and then turned over to our Professional Standards Division for review of policies, practices, and training. We work in close coordination with IPR throughout that, as the auditor said, complex process to ensure that at the end we've held people accountable and we have provided back to the citizens that have made complaints really good information about what's happened during that process.
Thank you. I think it'd be helpful if we get some more specific examples, perhaps a case scenario. Let's say I am a member of the public. I've just had a police encounter, and looking through the Independent Police Review Division reports, the most common complaint is one of rude behavior or language. So if I feel I've experienced a police encounter where there was rude behavior or language, what do I do? How do I go about that process of making that complaint, and kind of walk us through some of the steps your office would take when you receive that complaint?
So if somebody felt that they're the subject of some sort of police misconduct, let's say rudeness, there are a variety of ways that members of the public can reach our office. You can come to our office, which is located in City Hall, the first floor. We have 5 staff investigators who are very well trained to deal with members of the public where they're at, and who are fully trained in treating people equitable. I guess the most common way for someone to call our office, just based on our statistics, about 40% of our client base comes to us through the telephone. So they give us a call, they say, Officer Smith in North Precinct was rude to me. At that point, whether they just kind of gave us a brief thumbnail sketch of the complaint, we would then have the investigator talk to that person more in depth, try to find out what time of day the incident occurred, try to get as much information. A lot of times people don't have a lot of information, but if they can give us at least the time of day, the part of town, and if somebody witnessed something, if somebody's a direct witness, they can also file a complaint. And if they can give possibly who they think the complainant would be, I think that's kind of helpful information. So once we get that information, we put it together, the investigators hand it off to a supervisor, and the supervisor makes a decision on whether that case would be dismissed, handled as a service improvement opportunity, or on to internal affairs for a full investigation.
Does it matter how long I perhaps wait in making that complaint? Let's say I waited a week later till I finally felt the need to make that complaint. Does that impact the likelihood that that case may move forward?
No, generally the sooner somebody files a complaint with our office, the better. But if it's a week or 2 weeks, that's not really a qualitative difference. But if somebody files a complaint let's say 3 months later, we would still take that complaint and look at it. Our case handling guidelines give us the discretion to dismiss cases if we receive them after 60 days. But we have the discretion to accept cases that are older. But if it is an older case, it makes it less likely for us to be able to identify people.
And when I make a complaint, what types of feedback might I be expected to get? Do I get, when you decide to move the complaint forward, is there a telephone call, an email, or is the only feedback you get perhaps at the end?
Our goal is to try to touch base with our complainants, with our clients, particularly let's say somebody files a complaint with us. If we are going to dismiss that case, we would send them a letter, and our hope is within a month of somebody filing a complaint that we make a decision at IPR whether that case is going to be dismissed, handled as a services improvement opportunity, or a full investigation. And in Portland, a full investigation means that an officer is going to be contacted for an interview.
Okay. One more example is, does the process change depending on the type of complaint? Let's say it was a use of force complaint. Am I likely to experience a slightly different process if it's a use of force, or perhaps, let's say, a case of perception of disparity or racial profiling?
You've mentioned two of the cases where there is a presumption that our office will be conducting an investigation, or rather the system will. So IPR does, for the most part, a lot of the initial parts of the investigation. Talk to community members, gathering police records, dispatch records. Internal Affairs on the community member complaints does a lot of the officer interviews. So it's put together, that is the administrative investigation that the City of Portland does. In use of force cases, unless there is clear and convincing evidence that the officer member did not engage in misconduct, our office will forward that on for a full investigation. And it's not the same standard with disparate treatment, but pretty much it's a pretty high standard for us to dismiss those allegations as well.
Thank you. The public needs a police force that it can trust, that's fair, that's following proper procedures. Do you feel that the Independent Police Review Division can help build that trust through your efforts in the city?
When IPR was created in 2001, one of the purposes of City Council creating IPR was to increase the public's confidence in the delivery of police services. I'm somebody from the city of Miami. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and as a young person, I felt that the police were there to protect society from people like me or people who looked like me. And if I had a problem, I would not have contacted the police. One of the reasons why I became a criminal defense attorney, and one of the reasons why I work for the Auditor and do what I do, is so that when somebody feels that they're victimized by a criminal, that they feel comfortable talking to the police and saying that this person violated my rights, whatever it was, or stole something from me. I think our office is at a crucial point of being able to say to community members, if you have a concern, we're not going to try to judge you or what your concerns are or what you do. We're going to just listen to you, put together the information, and then forward that information on. So I think it's really important that members of the public have confidence in their police force. Portland's an incredibly safe city. We had 13 murders last year. Very low homicide rate, very low violent crime rate. But in a lot of things in our city, it's kind of tale of two cities type of a thing. Where folks who are on kind of the margins of our society might not feel that same level of investment as someone like myself who has a professional degree and who's able to own a house. What my goal for our office is that all people will feel comfortable being able to file a complaint with us, not just professionals.
Thank you. Chief Reese, I want to talk about this same issue of ensuring that we're engaging the public and gathering their trust, building their trust in police. But at the same time, within your organization, we have to build the trust of the officers. And I work in an organization where there is a union, and it's common for the employees of the union to be very concerned about the processes in which they're being evaluated, in which they're being judged on their performance. And it's even more unique with the Portland Police Bureau, because not only do you have the internal review process, but you have an external body involved in that review process. And just the very nature of that might create more tension or unease among line level staff. So I'm wondering if, is there something that police managers can do to ensure to their employees that the process of decision making around their performance and the complaints about performance are fair?
You know, that's a great question. And again, we have collective bargaining agreements. The city has HR policies that guide a lot of our practices in this area. We want to ensure that our employees at the city are treated with dignity and respect as they go through these various processes that allow us to figure out what happened at a certain time with an incident. The collective bargaining issues and, of course, underlying labor issues are complex, and we want to make sure that whatever processes we've put in place are fair and consistent. I think that one of the best things that we've done, and it'll be coming out in a couple weeks, working with the Independent Police Review, is design a discipline guide so that officers know if they're engaged in misconduct or poor performance, that this is the expected outcome, and taking the mystery out of what will happen at the end of a process, I think will help alleviate some of that concern.
Thank you. We're back to where we left off about changes. So what are some of the important changes that have happened to the Independent Police Review Division? And I know that the City Council just passed some of the reforms you proposed this January. So if you want to run us through
Sure.
broad changes and the most current changes.
Okay. So it wasn't very long after I came to office that it became clear to me, and mostly because of the information that I was receiving from former Director Mary Beth Baptista and Constantin, that we needed to strengthen our oversight authority, that IPR needed to have more of a presence and strengthen its ability to build community trust. It also became clear that some of the processes that were in place, particularly at the police review boards, were not consistent and sometimes not fair to officers. And so we, meaning Constantin and I, along with Mary Beth Baptista, were involved in two major efforts to reform police oversight system. The first was in 2010, and again following in 2013, following the city's settlement agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice. And because of the code changes enacted in 2010, IPR is an active participant in administrative investigations of police bureau members and can challenge findings and can send cases back for further investigation. There have been some big changes to the police review boards. IPR is a voting member of the police bureau's police review boards that recommend discipline to the chief and the police commissioner. Those boards have since 2010 been convened and managed by an independent facilitator. In use of force cases, 2 members of the public sit on those review boards. The police bureau issues a report to the public twice a year on the outcomes of those police review board decisions. IPR has, since 2010, attended the scene of all officer-involved shootings and in-custody death events, acting as a civilian observer on behalf of the public at the initial investigation of use of deadly force incidents. IPR has the authority to conduct independent investigations and subpoena individuals and records, and IPR's outreach to community groups has become extensive. Our investigators regularly accompany our outreach coordinator to take complaints out in the community, rather than having to have folks come into our office. In the summer of 2013, in response again to the DOJ requirements for more timely investigations by IPR, we hired 4 new investigators, 3 of whom are here today. Thank you very much. And all of whom are highly qualified investigators with years of experience working with individuals suffering from mental illness and or experiencing emotional distress. With a total of 5 investigators, IPR can now conduct more thorough investigations in less time. Also, in response to DOJ requirements and to codify some existing practices, additional code changes were recently enacted. We codified the practice of IPR interviewing officers directly, authorized discipline guidelines, as the chief just mentioned, to create consistency, fairness, and greater objectivity in discipline processes and decisions. Discipline decisions will be more transparent. The chief will have to provide a rationale when final discipline is outside of the range of the recommended by the discipline guidelines. The Citizen Review Committee is a community advisory body to IPR and the police, and we have made some changes to their authority as well. They will now be automatically eligible to sit on police review boards, recommending discipline to the chief. And we've also expanded the number of members of the CRC from 9 to 11. So as a result of these major reforms, the Independent Police Review Division in my office has matured, has become more responsive to the community we serve, and is more effective in the city's efforts to hold police officers and command staff accountable. And like the chief, I would like to thank very much the staff who are here today. You do fabulous work. I'm very proud of you and honored that you could attend.
Thank you. Do you envision additional future changes coming out of either internal affairs process or the independent review division related to the DOJ agreement over the next couple years?
I envision that this will be a never-ending evolution to make sure that we're serving the public in the way that they expect to be served, but also at the comfort level of City Council, so that they'll pass the changes that either we would want or community members would want, or that both the Bureau and community members are comfortable with. We do have a couple of more tweaks in terms of what's necessary for CRC, but I envision that that the community will come back to this issue many, many times. That's the one thing I've learned about being the city auditor and working with IPR.
Comments from other guests?
I think the DOJ settlement agreement, I think it's been huge for the city. Back in 2010, 2 of the things that the auditor and Mary Beth and myself wanted to get done was the city have a discipline guideline and some sort of timeline on how long investigations get done, and that was not able to be done. And unfortunately, it took the Federal Department of Justice and Tom Perez and Eric Holder to come to town and say, City of Portland, you guys say you're progressive and you're treating folks with mental health issues in a way that is violation of their constitutional rights. As somebody who considers himself a progressive, frankly, I was ashamed of myself that that the federal government had to come to town to tell us something that we knew already for years. So that created a strong sense of inertia. But our code changes that we put in front of the council, it still took us about 4 or 5 months to get that done. And I think those are important changes, but they're not earth-shattering, and it still took us 4 or 5 months. So, I think the test for the city of Portland will be when the DOJ is gone, will we still live up to our own progressive ideals?
Thanks.
Yeah, Brian, if I could add a little bit to that. Constantine was meeting with us earlier this week, and we talked about continuous improvement. What is the next phase for us? We've got changes that we've implemented in our processes. We've got a discipline guide, and maybe the next step is education-based discipline processes. And we had a robust discussion about what does that look like so that employees can learn from their mistakes and improve their performance as we move forward as an organization. So that's a great opportunity, I think, for us to bring our labor unions, our employees into that discussion, say, what does that next phase look like, and how do we learn from mistakes and really help employees improve performance?
Great, thank you. Well, I am an academic, and I have to ask some data questions. So in reviewing the Independent Police Review Division's annual reports, I noticed some unique trends that I wanted to have you comment on. One is that there's a downward trend in complaints, citizen complaints coming into the Independent Police Review Division over time. There was a high of 781 in 2004 complaints and a low of 385 in 2010. And the last annual report in 2012, there were 413 complaints. So that's close to a 50% reduction in citizen complaints over time. Now, it's hard to really know the reason, the exact reason behind that drop, but I wanted to get your interpretation or your impression of these trends.
So, it's funny that you bring up our annual report. We're getting ready to put together another set of annual reports. So I've been looking at other annual reports for other jurisdictions that have oversight mechanisms like Portland. And that is, the downward trend is something that other oversight agencies have seen. IPR was created in 2001. There was a particular dynamic at play at that particular time. I think one concern that I've heard from members of the public is that there's possible concern that people are discouraged. So that's another reason why they haven't filed complaints. So we've tried to make sure that we're engaging in effective outreach continuously to make sure that people feel that our office is a valuable resource for them and is actually something useful. So I really can't tell you why it has gone down. One other thing is that just kind of calls for service that the police engage in has gone down as well. I don't think it's been 50%, but it has gone down as well. So.
And if I could add a little bit to that, we have also watched our use of force numbers decline significantly the last 5 years. So Chief Sizer started us on a process that really made significant improvements to how we were de-escalating situations and talking to officers about the appropriate use of force. And so in an agency where we make 35,000 arrests every year, we only have to use force 3% of the time. And those force numbers have declined by about 50% along with the complaints. I think that really points to good strategies about de-escalation, good training, and engaged supervision at all levels of the organization.
Thank you. Great work. Another trend I found in the reports over an 8-year period looking from 2005 to 2012, the outcome as a result of the complaint process, and this would be, it was a table in there that talked about the outcomes of complaints coming from internally, coming from citizens, and torts. And it included, those outcomes included 10 terminations, 33 resignations or retirements. So about 43 officers were either asked to leave or voluntarily left as a result of the complaint processes we have here, which is approximately about 4% of the sworn officers. But sometimes I get the impression that maybe the public, and including myself, may have felt that officers aren't at risk of losing their jobs, and this is perhaps some data that tells us that there are real risks and consequences to police performance here in Portland. And I just wanted to get your impression, again, interpretation of those trends in the data.
I think our oversight mechanism in Portland has grown significantly over the last 12, 13 years. As somebody who has to deal with officers, I think they take the consequences of investigations very seriously. One of my abilities as the IPR director is to sit in on interviews, and one time I wanted to just sit in on an interview, and I let IA know, and they informed the officer. And I guess when I showed up, the officer was kind of surprised, and he just turned just the whitest shade of pale that the IPR at the time assistant director wanted to be there for his interview. So that kind of made me think about, okay, just from an officer's perspective, that this is, any investigation possibly might end up being something that leads to you being terminated. And it kind of made me a little bit more serious about what I do. But to your question in particular, I think there are, I think the trends are pretty clear about where we've come as a city. I think one of the other things about why the public doesn't have a great sense of, the facts and figures you just stated is I don't think we do a good job as a city talking about that. Part of giving the public the trust in our system is communicating with them like they're adults, providing them information, not hiding behind state law or our own kind of inertia or protocols. There's a lot of information that we should provide members of the public to show them, look, this is what we do. So one of the things that the auditor did in 2010 was, with the creation of the police review board, have public reports of, okay, every case that goes in front of the police review board, which is cases where an officer is facing discipline of a day or more, each of these cases will be summarized, and the discipline that came out of that, this is what happened. I think providing members of the public the mechanism for them to see things themselves, I think is one way for us to improve the public's faith and trust in us. Because it's one thing for me as a city official to say, I think oversight in this town is awesome. But if a member of the public can say, I've looked through the last 3 years of annual reports, or I looked through the public reports of the police review board, and they take this seriously and they do a really good job, and most officers never have a complaint. Most officers don't have to go through the police review board. But if an officer does something that's inappropriate, the city takes it seriously, does a serious investigation, hires professionals at the auditor's office, at the police bureau to investigate it. And if it comes to the point of the officer being terminated or facing some significant discipline, that the ultimate decision makers have all the information that they need to make that decision.
Any other responses, commentary? Okay. One of the reasons I ask these questions is to get us thinking about what does it mean to have a successful police oversight. And are there other things, how can we tell we're doing a good job? And there are other things that you would want to look at or have looked at, and do these indicators help you tell whether or not we're doing a good job?
To bang the transparency drum again, the problems that we've had with oversight in Portland hasn't been that we haven't investigated cases. The problem has been that I think the city has, where the city and the members of the public have been, are kind of at two extremes a little bit, where one isn't talking to the other. As city officials, we need to have a continuous dialogue with the public. And our responsibility as city is to give the members of the public the means to be able to have an effective dialogue, provide them with the information to be able to do that. And at least there are a lot of cases where the city has tried to terminate an officer, and then an arbitrator says, city, you haven't followed these officers' constitutional rights. So having an objective basis for discipline, the discipline guideline that the bureau is set to put into place, that is kind of one of those observable metrics that I think our oversight system needs. The fact that the chief will have to, and the police commissioner, who's the ultimate responsible party for discipline of officers, will have to provide a rationale for any decision that's outside of the range. I think that is huge because at the city, sometimes we've found ourselves in positions of the city trying to discipline officers or terminate officers, and then we're providing our rationale to the Oregonian after the case is done, as opposed to in the case file. So, I mean, kind of post hoc, justifications just don't work. It didn't work when I was a defense attorney, and it doesn't work in a discipline system.
And I would add to that I would hope that our city council is more engaged in this discussion than they have been recently, because they are the body making that decision about the strengthening our role, ensuring that we are providing the transparency, the independence, the neutrality, and getting to a point in which we are able to talk openly about these issues, resolve some of the hurdles that are still in place. And that is one of the disappointments of this last round of bringing forward our code changes, that it was so difficult to get council engaged in that discussion in a meaningful way. And so I would want to make a pitch for that, and a pitch for folks encouraging the council to stay involved in this. There's very few parts of city government that are more important than maintaining a safe and fair and law-abiding public safety system, and council really needs to always be engaged in whatever discussions we're having, and so that is the one additional fact that I would add to everything Constantin has said about transparency and giving information to the public so that they can make their own determination about whether or not the system is where they want it to be.
Chief Reese, any thoughts?
Well, I think one of the important components that we were just able to negotiate through the collective bargaining process is performance evaluations. And I've asked our division commanders to set clear, consistent expectations for employees' performance, and then to let the employees know what those expectations are and hold people accountable to them. Because most of our officers are doing exceptionally good work. The ones that aren't, we need to hold them accountable. The performance evaluation process that we're starting in March will help us do that. It's important to the accountability. That's another layer of accountability for our organization that will help us improve service to you.
You're here.
Thank you. Can I dig into your idea a little bit, LaVonne, in terms of getting city council a little more active? I guess what would you envision that looking like, the process around that?
Well, I would say that I was a little bit stunned this last go-around when comparing it to the council, the seated council of 2010. We had a very aware mayor. We had council members who were supportive of us, our partners, and the discussion was very different. I didn't feel like this elected official and my staff were out there with targets on our back for bringing up the idea of further reforms to meet the requirements of the Department of Justice, and this last go-around, that's exactly what I felt like, and it was out of whack. And so I don't know if I've answered your question, but the Police Bureau is an organization within the city that must have all of the elected officials' eyes on it at all times for a variety of reasons, so that they will understand the pressures and issues presented to officers out on the street, and also so that they will be able to engage effectively in a conversation with the community about police oversight, about police training, about how to create a bureau that meets the community's standards.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more quick question from me, and I was interesting to find on the city auditor's website for the Independent Police Review Division that there's also a link to make commendations to officers. And I'm just curious how that process works and how it gets to the police bureau.
Well, our commendation process works very similarly as the complaint process. So somebody can file a commendation. They can do it with us, or they can do it with the police bureau. We kind of compile that information, send it off to the police bureau, and send it to the officer. As somebody who's kind of entrusted with, looking at the complaint system and the commendation system, there are a lot of officers who do their jobs beyond, the minimum, just, day in, day out, do very difficult things, do it very well. And I think a lot of members of the public recognize that. Even in a town like Portland. As somebody who has to be with officers on ride-alongs and that kind of thing to, just kind of get to know the process, I've seen for myself a lot of the hard work that police officers engage in. I think it's important for our system to recognize that aspect to it, because IPR isn't here to make a judgment about police officers. We're part of the fact-gathering system, and our system's a little bit unique in that IPR, internal affairs, we don't do findings after an investigation. We compile the information, and then we provide it to the police officer supervisors to make that decision, and ultimately to the chief of police and the police commissioner, who's the mayor, for the final decision.
Thank you. Well, we are reaching the point where we're going to open it up to Q&A of the program. So if you have a written question on an index card, I'd like you to please hold it up high so that City Club staff can collect it from you. And we'll now take questions from the audience. And always, we invite members to the microphone to ask their question. Asking questions at the Friday Forum microphone is a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Before asking your questions, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. And also, I will read at least one index card question.
Hi, Carol Witherell, member of City Club. This may be an elephant sitting in the middle of the room. Question. Is this problem more huge than the violation of constitutional rights of the mentally ill? It's my understanding that the Department of Justice was called to investigate both police interactions with the mentally ill, but also with people of color, and for racial discrimination or bias possibilities. So the fairness hearing of next Tuesday, the Department of Justice, as I understand it, is reviewing oral testimonies from many citizens around the city that include incidents involving, they believe, racial bias and discrimination. Would you comment on what the police force might learn from these compelling testimonies that are of crucial importance to many of our citizens and communities, and really they ought to be of crucial concern to all of us? Is there still an elephant sitting in the middle of the room?
Sure, I will. We live in a society where a lot of folks feel that they're not being treated equally, equitable, and I think the police bureau, like other parts of the city, needs to treat members of the public in a more equitable fashion. I don't think you can separate the police bureau out from any part of the city of Portland where, I think we would all agree that there are still legacies of institutional racism that we have to deal with. I know our staff at IPR, we have to do continuous training on equity, on gender identity. Even though I'm a son of an immigrant, I don't have this equity thing figured out. So for police officers who have to do a very complex job, there's a former IA lieutenant who has the soul of a poet, apparently, who said that police officers have to be warriors and social workers at the same time. And also, they also have to know how to do that equity piece as well. And I think the Police Bureau needs to do a better job of that, but frankly, I think our whole society does too, so.
When I appreciate Constantine's comments. I couldn't agree more. I expect our officers to treat everyone with dignity and respect. And if they don't, I'm going to hold them accountable to doing a better job. Fundamentally, we all have to own this in our community, and it's a tough debate that we're having right now. I do want to say that we really appreciate our work with the Department of Justice around some of these issues. We've learned a lot through that process. We've learned that we can do better, and we're committed to those reform measures and improving our service to this city.
Thank you. I'd like to read a question off the card that was given to me. Please give the rationale for allowing police officers 48 hours before cooperating with use of force investigations.
It's in deadly force cases, so again, it's not all use of force cases, but I think it's probably specific, the question, to deadly force cases. The officers have the constitutional right that all of us do not to talk to detectives or anyone else about the case. So while we encourage officers and want them to talk to our detective division and the district attorney's office as part of that investigation, they don't have to, just like anyone else in our community. As part of the administrative investigation, we can require officers to come in and talk to us. It invokes garrity, which is a legal ruling that then they cannot be criminally prosecuted if they did something wrong in a criminal setting. So we work very closely with the district attorney so that we don't compromise a criminal investigation by an administrative review. It is something that we're trying to resolve with our labor folks, and it is an important piece that I am really focused on this year. There has to be some way that we can get officers to give on-scene interviews to our detectives and to our district attorney. We have some collective bargaining issues around that. There is a clause in the Officer Bill of Rights, but again, we really want our officers to cooperate in those investigations. It provides transparency and accountability. Again, it goes back to what Constantin and the auditor have said. They're part of that process on scene immediately, and we want to ensure the public, through their eyes, that we're doing our very best work.
Thank you.
Wynn Wakala, City Club member. I had the fortune to work for the Portland Police. I was an accounting manager, but I worked at the Portland Police, and I also worked at Washington County Sheriff's Office. And I know from being around those departments, being an auditor or an accountant is nothing like being a police officer. I mean, they have lots of stress and trauma just in their, it's like boredom, doing patrol, and then sudden trauma when you have to respond to something. So I'm concerned about the police officers. If something does come up, how do we take care of them with their psychological needs so that we can put them back out on the streets, because there's a lot of training that's involved for them to do their jobs.
Yeah, thank you for caring about our officers. They do tremendous work in our community, keeping us safe. And like a lot of first responders, they see a lot of trauma, and it impacts them. We do have an employee information system now that is very robust. It tracks a lot of information, and one of those data points is the amount of trauma incidents that an officer is exposed to, the traffic accidents where a child has lost a life, or a situation where we're responding to a homicide scene where someone has been shot and killed. Those have an impact, and we have to be mindful of what that does to an officer and to help them through that process. We do have a very robust employee assistance program, and it is being used more and more frequently by our officers.
Paul Milius, City Club member. My question gets to intake, hiring practices. I have a friend who was once managing labor relations in the city some years ago, and he observed that guys who play first-string football tend to become police officers. Guys who play second-string football in high school tend to be firemen. And his somewhat acerbic observation was the first-stringers tend to be meaner. The second-stringers just want to be heroes. So I guess my question is, what sort of screening goes into hiring a police officer, and have those practices changed in the light of the other changes that are going on with accountability and review and so on?
Well, that's a great question. We do have a very stringent hiring process. We hire about 1 out of every 12 people who apply to be a police officer in Portland. They go through a background process. They go through a psychological and early on psychological examination, so that we're not spending a lot of resources on people that aren't going to pass a later psychological examination. They do some physical fitness testing and medical testing, and again, a very rigorous process. If you happen to see the news yesterday or read about it, you saw us swearing in 11 brand new Portland police officers. And I tell you, I'm so proud of our personnel division and the work they've done around hiring highly qualified, diverse candidates. In the 3.5 years I've been chief, we've hired almost 100 officers, and we've been able to achieve over 42% diversity in the hiring. It's changing the face of the Portland Police Bureau. These are the folks that wear this uniform every day and serve you, and they look like our community now.
Hi, my name is Susan Pease-Bannett. I'm a psychotherapist and social worker. I've often, in my career, had occasion to work with police departments and have a tremendous respect. And I actually wanted to follow up on Wynn's question. I share her concern. I speak internationally about neuroscience and the neurobiology of trauma. And, you know, I heard this sort of progressive, wanting the city to be progressive. I think to be truly progressive means to create a culture of psychological and neurobiological awareness within the police department itself. And often when I've had conversations, there seems to be this sort of us against them, like nobody understands what we do, nobody understands how hard it is. You know, I could say that too. When I work at an inpatient unit, I'm restraining people way bigger than I am. Nobody really understands what that's like either. And I don't expect them to understand that. I expect that I'm going to take care of myself. So, and that I'm working in a culture that values that. Certain police cultures around the country do, and some don't. And I want to ask you, where are you at in developing a more psychologically aware culture? Because my experience is that using the employee assistance program is stigmatized, and you have to feel like you have a problem rather than an acknowledgement. We're all being neurobiologically affected by this work. How do we be proactive and take care of ourselves in that way? So,
you know, that is a shift in our policing culture, and I think officers are more and more willing to reach out for help when they feel like they've gone through a traumatizing incident. And it is a part of deadly force encounters. We require the officer to do that. And it does help get rid of that stigma. Those conversations are confidential, so I think that helps as well. One of the most interesting things that really has helped me guide our officers in this changing dynamic in law enforcement, because as you heard, we have a very safe city. But our officers are responding to more and more issues around social disorder, homelessness, mental health issues, and drug addiction. And that is a different dynamic for us. And we have to have officers who realize that they have to treat a person who's mentally ill with compassion and empathy, even though they can be unpredictable and dangerous, and different than we would somebody who just robbed a bank. We can't treat people the same way in those two fashions. We really have to be compassionate and empathetic in our response to people with addiction, mental health issues, and homelessness. I remember meeting with John Campbell, who's here today, and John gave me a document that talked about how officers are either farmers or warriors. And it's a really tough dynamic in our police department, because there are times where you are rushing into the scene of a violent crime, a bank robbery, somebody's armed, and you're risking your life, and you need to be, as John said, the warrior. But most of the time we do this work, we're farmers. We're nurturing a community, and we're helping people grow. And I'll tell you, as we talked about it, John said, if you are a farmer in a warrior setting, you're going to get hurt or get somebody else hurt. If you're a warrior and you should be a farmer, you're going to make people angry. And so that's a really, I think, change in our philosophy as an organization and a change in policing in general. We have to start seeing ourselves in this new role.
B.J. Seymour, City Club member. Some time ago, there was a case where a jaywalker was taken to the ground. Now, I never knowingly committed a crime, but I acknowledge jaywalked many times, and that was scary to me. Is that usual procedure for something like jaywalking?
I don't think so. I'm not sure of the incident, but in general, most people comply with an officer's orders. If we're going to issue somebody a traffic ticket or a jaywalking ticket, or encounter them in some enforcement capacity, most people follow the law and follow the officer's directions. Again, as I said, we make 35,000 arrests in a city of 600,000 people every year. We only use force in 3% of those cases. So force is a very small part of what we do, but it's an important part that we get right. We have to get that right, because that's where I think police accountability really matters to this community, and we don't want our officers using more force than necessary to accomplish whatever lawful purpose they're trying to accomplish.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of broadcast time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for today. I'm sure it was going to be a good question. You have to ask it to our folks afterwards. As we close for today, please join me in offering our sincere thanks to Auditor LaVonne Griffin-Valade, Chief Mike Reese, Constantin Severe, and Brian Renauer. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.